Hi guys, so here I am attempting to do the first video that I was sharing with you guys that I was gonna do, and I had shared that the first video that I did want to share with you guys was gonna be about forgiveness. And what's kind of difficult about the subject is some might argue that you don't know what I've been through, so how are you going to tell me it's just that easy to forgive? And you know what, you're probably right. I haven't walked in your shoes, um, but that's not to say God can't put it in your heart to help you to forgive somebody who you feel has wronged you. And there's so many scriptures in the Bible that I feel like I look to now when it comes to the area of forgiveness that I have to lean on, um, so that my heart doesn't grow hard towards people or to that particular person who I feel has wronged me. With that being said, I wanted to share with you guys something that I went through, that when it came to forgiving this person for almost 2 decades, um, I didn't know how to forgive them. And I was really angry and bitter towards them. But when I became a Christian and I gave my life to Christ, that completely changed. And I no longer harbored anger and bitterness towards this person. So here it goes. I grew up with um, my mom and my stepdad. Now, I knew my dad growing up, but I lived with my mom, and my mom had full custody of me, or primary custody of me. So she ended up marrying my stepdad. So he was the one I was around most of the time growing up. Um, when I was a little girl and I was 4 years old, when my parents would go out, I'm outside, excuse the noise. I have nowhere else to go. I have kids inside. And so it's either the cars or my children, and I figured the cars might be a little easier to hear. But when I was 4 years old, um, when my parents would go out, my stepdad's brother would watch us. And I can't even recall or remember like when it first happened or how it happened or anything. I just remember um, he would call my sister to the room, and then I can't even say how much longer later, he would call me to the room, one by one, me and my older sister Lisa. And so one by one he would call us, and being alone in there with him, he would touch us inappropriately. Um, he molested me, pretty much. I mean, there's no other way around it. And I it's so foggy. I mean, I was so little that I can't really give a lot of details, but I do know, I do remember bits and pieces of it. I remember always hearing a sound of basketball sneakers, because there was always, he always had the TV on, so I'd always hear the basketball game in the background. Um, I remember him telling me that if um, he would give me things, he would kind of bribe me, and tell me if I didn't say anything, he would give me this or that candy. Or um, I remember one time it was like this feather thing, and I thought it was really pretty, and he said, okay, well, if I give this to you, um, you can't say anything. And so me, just being a kid, was like, okay. And I remember one day being in a police station, and my mom was crying um, on my stepdad's shoulder, and I remember looking at her and going, Mommy, what's wrong? And my mom said, um, your Uncle Paul did something very bad to your sister. And right when she said that, it clicked, and and I realized she must be talking about what he used to do to me too, because he would call her in the room and then he would call me in the room. And I looked at my mom and I said, Mommy, um, Uncle Paul did that to me too. And I remember my mom, the look on her face was just like, she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You know, here she is in the police station, I'm guessing reporting what happened that my sister shared. And now she's finding out it happened to her second daughter. And I remember going in the back in one of the police officers' offices, and I remember him asking me questions, and I remember just trying to, I don't think I was being shy, I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, and then I was just answering him, and I remember him asking me if I could draw a male body part, if I knew what that looked like, and I did. And I think they asked those questions just to know for sure, like, that really happened and I wasn't just saying it. I'm not sure why he asked me that. And after that, I remember finding out he went to jail. My stepdad's brother went to jail. And I remember growing up, my mom always saying, don't ever mention that name in this house. I don't ever want to hear that name. And it was always very hard for my mom to talk about him or refer to him, you know, at family gatherings. And I think just seeing my mom struggle with it made me kind of think in my head as a little girl, well, maybe I should hate him too. Maybe I should dislike him too. I mean, my mom hates him because of what he did to me, so I should hate him for what he did to me. And probably around the age of 9 or 10, I started to, I guess I realized what had happened around that age, like really realized what happened. And I started to grow anger and hatred towards this man. And whenever his name would get mentioned or they would refer to him, like it was like my family would refer to him, but we would never say his name, you know, like it was like taboo to say his name. I just remember as a teenager, by the time I turned around 13 or 14, starting to use not just everything that was going on in my life, but also what happened to me as a little girl as like a reason to justify my hurt that I had holding like inside of my heart, and it was just something I really struggled with as a teenager. I was never shy to say, oh, when I was a little girl I was molested. I was never shy to say that to people. You know, I didn't exactly go announcing it, but my whole life I've always been very open about it. And I've always kind of just shared that story with people. But at the same time, I was always very angry too. So I wasn't shy to share it, but I was also very angry on the inside. And the weekend before I became a Christian, I remember being very drunk and getting in a fight with my ex, and I can't even tell you what it was about. I don't even remember what it was about. But I remember being drunk and we were arguing, and I remember just telling him, I just don't understand why God would let someone take my innocence from me when I didn't even understand what innocence was. Like, how could God just let that happen to me? That's not fair. That's not fair to me. And I don't remember anything else from that night. I just remember seeing that, like, very clearly. I remember being very drunk and just shouting that. And then the following weekend, I got saved. I became a Christian. Now, about a month after becoming a Christian, my little sister, which is my stepdad's daughter, my little sister, her, I think it was her great-grandmother, had just passed away. And I remember my sister inviting me to the funeral, and then I remember my mom calling me a little bit after I had just got done talking to my sister, my little sister, and my mom saying, I just want you to know you don't have to go to the funeral. And I told my mom, well, why wouldn't I go? And she said, because you know who's gonna be there. And I was like, oh, well, that's okay. It's okay, Mama. I'm gonna go because I'm gonna go for Michelle, my little sister. That's her name. And I should be there for her because it was very hard for her when her grandma passed away. And I remember after I got off the phone with my mom and hearing that he was gonna be there, and just tripping out like, man, God, almost, 4 years old when it happened, I think, 4 or 5, and then here I am, I just turned 19, all these years later, 15, almost 20 years later, now I'm gonna see this man, and now I'm a Christian? What? Like, just tripping out, like, feeling like, okay, like God's timing, like I just right away, I was like, this is your timing, God. Like, you did this, like I don't know how to explain that, but I just knew it was God. I knew it was God. And I remember praying and telling God, just don't let me see him though, Lord. I don't want to see his face. And I remember God whispering to my heart and saying, I want you to see his face. And not only do I want you to see his face, I want you to tell him you forgive him. Because right now I'm going to heal your heart from what he did. And right then I had peace towards that man. And I knew there was a real forgiveness in my heart towards him that I had never felt. Right in that moment, like, it went from like being ugh to like being, oh, I don't know how to explain it, but I remember telling my aunt and my uncle to pray for me. I remember asking my uncle to come with me because I don't want to go by myself. God wants me to tell him I forgive him. And my aunt and my uncle, they prayed over me, and I remember just praying that whole, I think it was about a week or two before the funeral, and I remember going to the church and seeing him from afar off. I sat towards the back, and then my uncle, and I remember when I saw him, I was like my heart kind of like stopped a little, and it felt really surreal to me. And then we all left the church, and then we drove to the burial site. And I remember telling my uncle, I'm gonna go talk to him now. And my uncle kind of stood off in the distance. And I remember walking up to him and saying, Paul, can I talk to you? And he said, sure. And it was really awkward because, I could tell it was awkward for him, like it was for me, but I just knew I was supposed to do it. And I remember standing there, and no lie, my legs were shaking, like it was weird, like my legs were shaking, like you see in the movie when someone's scared. I'm sorry, there's people playing basketball right now, and I'm trying to do this. And so I remember standing there, standing in front of him, and my legs were shaking. And I remember looking in his eyes and telling him, a couple weeks ago, I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And when I found out you were going to be here today, God told me he wanted me to come shake your hand and let you know that I forgive you. And I stuck out my hand and I said, Paul, I forgive you for what happened. I'm not angry at you. I'm not mad at you. I hold no bitterness towards you. I forgive you. Because when I was standing there, shaking this man's hand, telling him I forgive him, and my legs were shaking, I could feel God holding me. It was the most beautiful feeling I've ever felt. To stand there in front of that man, almost 20 years later, a man I hated, a man I wished would die. I used to wish he would die. I hated him. And there I am talking to him, telling him I forgive him. And I could feel God holding me, like sustaining me to be able to do that. And it was such a healing moment for me that I know I couldn't have done without God by my side. God wanted me to share this with you guys because forgiveness is very hard. And sometimes we want to feel justified in our anger towards someone. And maybe we are justified in our anger. Maybe there are legit reasons we could be angry at that person. You know, but God says in His Word to forgive others as He has forgiven us. And just knowing in my heart that I had just become a Christian and I had been forgiven of everything I had ever done. God wanted me to forgive this man of what he had did. Because sin is sin in God's eyes. And I know some might argue and say, oh no, that's terrible. That was a terrible thing to happen. But sin is sin in God's eyes. It doesn't matter how big or small it is. And when we hold on to unforgiveness, it hurts us more than it hurts that person. Because the stronger I started to feel towards this man in my anger, the more depressed I got. The more bitterness I had to wish death upon someone. That's how angry I was with him. Because all I could do was think about what he did. Now, if there's someone watching this, and you happen to be struggling with unforgiveness towards someone, no matter what it is, maybe it was unfaithfulness in a marriage, or a friend that you felt stabbed you in the back, or maybe you dealt with molestation, maybe you're angry at your parents, I don't know, but maybe you have unforgiveness in your heart towards someone. I just want to encourage you to ask God for strength to be able to approach that person. Well, first ask God for strength to forgive that person and to release it into His hands. Because the moment you do that, you will feel a freedom that is hard to feel outside of God doing that. And then I would encourage you to ask God for the strength to approach that person, to restore whatever wrong has been done. Because again, when we harbor unforgiveness towards people, we're damaging our hearts and our souls and our sanity more than we are that person's. There's a reason God calls us to forgive, because the Bible says that Satan does not come except to steal, kill, and destroy. And if Satan can convince somebody to hold unforgiveness towards someone, then he can destroy someone's life even. because my life was being destroyed, harboring unforgiveness, not towards just that man, but towards a lot of things that had happened in my life. Unforgiveness towards even something like that, can cause people to commit suicide because they just feel so angry and hurt and betrayed by the people they love. And so there's so much truth to that scripture when Jesus said that, the thief does not come except to steal, kill, and destroy. But then he follows that with, but I have come so that they may have life, and that more abundantly. And when we really grasp that truth, that Jesus came so that we could have life and that more abundantly, when we can forgive those who have done us wrong, in the power of Christ, not on our own, because when we try to do it on our own, really, we're not forgiving that person. It's kind of just lingering in the back of our head. We think we could forgive them, but really we haven't given it to God, because should something else happen where we feel irritated towards that person, let's say, we're going to be quick to bring it up and throw it back in their faces. That's not unforgiveness. That's not forgiveness. That's still being bitter towards that person. That's unforgiveness. But when we truly give the hurt that we have towards someone into the hands of God, only then can we walk in the freedom and the peace that true forgiveness through Christ brings.